consent to their inclusion. The recording will be available on the City Corporation's YouTube channel following the meeting, and it shall be retained for up to 1 civic year. Whilst we endeavour to live stream all our public meetings, technical difficulties may sometimes prevent live broadcast. In these instances, we aim to upload a recording after the end of the meeting. All personal data will be processed in accordance with the Data Protection Act 2018, and for any further information on that, please feel free to contact us. At item 1, we have received apologies from Tyes Brooke, Bethany Coombs, Jason Groves and Deborah Oliver. I've also been notified that James Thompson will join the meeting at 3. Are there any others I should be aware of?
Just to say I'm joining here online.
Thank you, Jason. I'm not aware of any others. So next item, Town Clerk.
At item 2, declarations under the Code of Conduct in respect of items on the agenda. I have not received notice of any declarations of interest unless any members wish to make one now. Being none, we move to item 3. Here at item 3, we have the minutes from the previous meeting held on the 22nd of November. These are to agree on pages 5 to 10.
Thank you very much, Town Clerk. Now, I wasn't here at the last meeting, so I'm relying on those that were to advise me if there are any corrections. Thank you. So can we approve the minutes? Thank you very much. In doing that, I did want to just make a couple of observations, if I can, in the minutes, because increasingly I'd like us to move to a place of more specificity. So it's not, I don't find it terribly helpful to say that in due course or later in the autumn. It'd be extremely helpful if we could be much clearer about that and say, give it a specific time. If that time was to slip, then I think, okay, we can understand the rationale or reasons, the logical reasons for a slippage. But this to me leaves it too open. So could we just in future try to be clearer about that in our discussions, so Town Clerk's in a position to record something that gives us a firmer point? Would that be agreed by committee? Yeah, thank you very much. Town Clerk, then let's move on.
At item 4, we have the Q2 Revenue and Capital Budget Monitoring Report of the Commissioner on pages 11 to 50, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. A report of the Commissioner. Is it you that's going to talk to this?
Mark will talk to this one. I'll talk to the MTFP if that's okay.
Thank you. Mark, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Item 4 is a regular quarterly update on the revenue and capital outturn position. This is at the half-year point. The headlines are that the forecast at Q2 has now moved to a break-even position from Q1, where we were forecasting an overspend of 0.9 million. The change is mainly due to further unplanned pay underspends, plus some additional Home Office pay award income of approximately 0.9 million. The pack comprises of a report and a slide deck from page 18 onwards. I'm going to start referring to the slide deck as we go through. The break-even position, within that there are a number of key variances, and these are shown on a waterfall chart on page 25. As you will see from there, there's several compensating under and overspends. So we're showing additional government grant income, local policing underspends, core staff vacancies, offset by fracas extension cost pressures, other IT and professional fees cost pressures, and lower than anticipated income recovery, particularly from the Economic and Cybercrime Academy courses. The forecast at Q2 is underpinned by a number of key assumptions. So the first one is that the police officer headcount target of 996 officers will continue to be met, which is measured in 2 points in the year at the end of September and the end of March. At the end of September, COLP achieved the headcount target, which secured 50% of £2.6 million ring-fence funding. Another key assumption is that overtime will be contained within the £4.1 million budget. There's further details on this on page 27. £4.4 million worth of planned mitigations will be delivered, and those are set out on page 29. At the moment, there is a reasonable degree of confidence that they will be met in full, albeit there are some compensating mitigations. And the staff pay award, at the moment, we've modelled that at 3.2% in line with communications, but if that changes, there will be a budgetary consequence. The The report also looks at some other areas of CULP spend, POCA, Proceeds of Crime Act income, on page 33 and 34. At the moment, the POCA reserve is being used principally to fund the asset recovery and civil recovery teams. We've mentioned this before at committee meetings, that the use of POCA to fund these teams is only sustainable for about another year, after which it's a bit of a cliff edge. And I think there's some reference to this in the MTFP later on. In short, we're budgeting to spend approximately 2.1 million per year on the asset recovery and civil recovery teams, but income is stubbornly about £500,000 a year. So there's an ongoing net deficit. Pages 37 to 39, we set out hotspot funding and progress against that. So as you may recall, PCCs were allocated £1 million worth of funding to deliver increased visibility in hotspot areas, so where there's antisocial behaviour. The forecast assumes that we're going to deliver against that and spend up to £1 million in delivering visible patrols across 7 hotspot areas. The final section of the report looks at the capital and project programme. So the whole life capital forecast is currently 50.4 million for CULP's programme, of which the outturn is 50.4 million against a budget of 40.6 million. The outturn is 50.4 million, of which 40.6 million is fracas related spend. The in-year outturn forecast for our capital and project programme is 16.7 million compared to an original budget of 13.6. So there is an overspend there, but that overspend is really timing. It relates to some fracas costs which were brought forward from last financial year, plus some additional fracas costs which have been incurred this year due to the extension, due to new functionality and extension of the programme, which we have found a funding solution to in year. Noting, of course, that the fracas programme on the capital spend is funded on a 2/3, 1/3 basis between the Home Office and the City Police. So I know there's a lot of information in there. It's a big pack, but happy to take any questions.
Can we start then with the revenue section of this report and take questions on that first of all? Madhush.
Thank you, Chair. Proceeds of crime receipts and the income from that. It seems quite, obviously it seems to be at a historically standard level, but how do we grow that income? Because it seems like a real opportunity in terms of, one of the few opportunities in terms of our income line, really. Thank you.
Dawn, do you want to, similar line, yeah, follow that.
Very similar, just talking about crypto assets and can we make more of that, because there's obviously a massive criminality around that, and I know we authorised a few years ago a wallet, crypto wallet, to keep money in, and I'm just wondering what's happening with that and could we expand that somewhat?
Okay, shall we take answers on that one first?
Paul or Alex wanted to speak from a operational perspective. I could make 1 or 2 points.
Thanks, Ali. Yeah, so I suppose from an operational perspective, lots of challenges around asset recovery, as we know about. And I think we did present back, it might not have been this committee, it might have been another one, some detail and deep dive. Do you remember when that one was? Yeah. It was this committee around assets. So we've definitely had a previous paper on it. It might be worth us just reviewing, going back to that for the detail and having a look at some of the operational things. So we can dig that out, update and bring that back again if that's useful.
Yeah, that would be. I have to say, I read that bit as well, and I was thinking about seeing it from the other end. And I saw Liz smiling. You know, when we're in magistrates' courts, we don't have any problem at all about seizing monies and handing it over. And I mean, what I did think is, I suppose one aspect of it is the timeliness at which some of these cases get to court, so that we can seize the money.
Yeah, and I think the paper did talk about the timelines and things that are in the pipeline. And of course, I suppose the challenges that what obviously, as you know, get seized at court. There is only a certain part of the pie that then ends up with policing after it's gone through quite a few other options. But we could, Chair, your call, of course. Perhaps if we get that paper out and recirculate it in the first instance, and then we could see if there is any more updates that are required after that.
If you could, I can see Ali wanting to come in as well, but if you could, but just if there are any updates to it, just in a cover note updated. Thank you, Ali.
Chair, it might be in the first instance a discussion for non-public, but just to reflect that as part of the police reform agenda, we're doing a lot of work as part of our national fraud and economic crime and cybercrime work about actually how we do industrialise activity in that space, and including the crypto piece as well, Dawn. But that's probably a separate conversation for a different format of meeting, maybe.
Thank you, Mantush.
Thank you, Chair. And obviously in the press this morning, there's been this £5.5 billion that's been mooted that the Mayor of London may be able to get his hands around from the arrest in Hampstead last year. Was the City of London Police involved in that? It's really a point of interest more than, to the work of this committee, but it is interesting.
Yeah, I'd have to go and research that, to be honest. So perhaps we can, if Chair, if you're happy, if we could formally action that we'll get that report and then do a refresh note on the top, we can bring that back to next.
Bye. Sorry.
Next committee.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions from other members? Because I've got a few myself, but I was hoping or waiting for others to come in. I think the first thing is to say that I think what you're telling us fundamentally in this is a reasonably good news story, and in forecasting the break even. I guess, as always, at this point in the year, I was going to say midpoint in the year, but of course, in operational terms, we're past that, but still at it in reporting terms, is what's your level, what's the real level of confidence, and how strong do you think the assumptions are that you're making? And if there's doubt about those at all, then have we built in sufficient additional mitigation? I think it's actually a bit of a miracle that you're saying that the mitigations that were proposed are being met in full. That I don't know if that's a first, but it doesn't happen that often. So if something falls, what else would you do?
Thank you, Chair. I think inevitably there's always risks in forecasting, and I think we have within the report on page 28, we set out some potential risks to the forecast. So the key one amongst that is the staff pay award, which as yet is unconfirmed. Every 1% increase in staff pay would increase our costs by 260,000. So that would in itself have an impact on the budget that we'd need to manage. Our assumptions at this stage are based on best information, so we believe them to be as robust as possible. But if there proves to be any additional cost pressures, we would need to try and find compensating findings and mitigations. On the mitigations point, there are some compensating mitigations in there, so we haven't delivered all of them as per what we set out at the beginning of the year. So, for instance, we'd forecast some additional overhead cost recovery. Some of that now has been reduced because we've got unplanned vacancies, which has an impact on our overhead recovery. But we have a slightly higher number of student officers, which has played into a larger saving compared to budget on our sort of rank ratio. So we are forecasting that we'll deliver those savings, but I'd be foolish to say that there is no risk in this budget at all. But we would look to find compensating savings if we find there are overspends.
Compensating savings from where?
Well, we would need to look very critically at historic areas of underspend. We'd need to look at have discussions with business leads around where they thought there would be opportunities, and we would have to do some due diligence to identify. At this time, we believe that the outcome will be a break-even position.
And Chair, sorry if I might add, the experience of the last few years has been that we have, you know, the mid-year forecast has been pretty accurate as to where we're going to land at the year end. So I'm reasonably confident. There has been one or two experiences of pressures coming in very late in the year, which would ultimately potentially knock our ability to maintain a balanced position, which is exactly, it's not a reason why we want to why we want to use it, but it's exactly why we've got a police general reserve ultimately that we might have to apply in extreme cases, basically.
Okay, thank you very much. Shall we move on to capital then? Any questions on the capital part of this report? Okay, I'll kick off then, if that's okay. We might say more about this when we get into non-public, I guess, but sorry, just turn that off. But in reading this, I guess what I was trying to think about, so I'm using this as a prompt as opposed to specific in a way. What I was starting to think about is the strength of our capital strategy or estates strategy. And I know we've got a paper in non-public, so we're probably best talking about that in detail there. But with that in the back of our minds, I would be interested in any further view you've got about perhaps a reality check or a robustness comment on some of the things that we've got in the whole life capital spend by project. And I do appreciate, and I can't see anybody on screen from city surveyors, because I know it's not all City of London Police. Some of it is with city surveyors. But I would be first of all, but I would be interested in your comment about that, and then the robustness of the things that are in here, and perhaps the likelihood of a spend happening as we're predicting.
If I start, then maybe bring Alex and Sue in. The overwhelming element of the police's capital budget, as opposed to, as you mentioned, the future police estates budget, which is held in the corporation by city surveyors. But the police capital budget is overwhelmingly focused on report fraud, or FCCRAS, and having with Chris having sweat, blood and tears over the last few weeks, we do actually now have a final commercial position on that capital piece. So that forecast, both for the whole life cost of report fraud and the in-year cost, is now a confirmed amount, basically. So in capital terms, that is that's the lion's share of our budget, obviously. But sorry, Alex and Sue, did you want to comment on other projects?
So I guess we've done our best in terms of the forecast. There is a bit that is outside of our control in some of the capital programme, which is where these are national projects and things like command and control, which is Metropolitan Police led. So there are some where we can't necessarily influence the timing, but we've done it as far as our sort of understanding of the position and the timescales is at this point in time.
Just, I mean, congratulations on getting the FCCRAS finally done. But I think it sort of is back to Helen's point. Are we squeezing everything else to get as good a position? You know, are we just putting off investment we should be doing now to try to keep this under control at this point in time? And is it going to be one of the things we're just storing up problems for the future with all these projects that are all coming in better than budget? And is that sustainable for any length of time?
Alex, Sue might want to step in there.
Yeah, so So it's a very good point. Those national programmes that we have no control over, we are monitoring very closely to make sure that we've got a position where this year we can reprioritise some of that spend to things that are in our gift if others are slipping. But also interim, we've got the funding in the budget for next year when that lands. There are a couple of the national projects which have pushed out quite far, so 2 or 3 years. We're budgeting as much as we possibly can with oversight projecting to 2030, but obviously we're not hugely confident in that cost until we get a bit closer to the nuances. So we're doing the very best we can and making sure that those that are slipping we have funding for and the resources in order to deliver when they are confirmed.
Ali?
Thanks, Sue. And I suppose also to say that we budget 5 million a year from revenue to fund capital and, well, to fund change projects, whether it's capital or revenue. That in all normal expectations, that will cover our requirements. And that will include cyclical replacement of assets as well as other projects, as proper projects. There have been 1 or 2 instances where we have had to go to the corporation to ask for an internal loan facility, FCCRS or report fraud being one of those. There's a potential to need to do that for the range which we come on to later, and previous events, like, for example, when we were replacing our fleet with ULEZ compliant fleet, we took out a loan to do that. So in targeted exceptional areas, we would ask for a loan if that's needed and justified, basically.
Thanks. Happy, Liz, because I thought I saw your hand sort of.
Yeah, no, happy.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions on the capital? Oh, okay, let's move on to capital.
At item 5, we have the Q2 workforce monitoring report of the Commissioner on pages 51 to 82. This is for information.
Thank you, Chair. So our HR Director, Kelly Daysbrook, is going to take you through the highlights.
Hi, thank you, everybody. So I'll just quickly go through the highlights and obviously open up for questions. Just want to say in Q2, we reached our officer target for the end of September, which is where we're monitored end of September and end of March. And obviously there is a financial implication if we don't meet that target. Pleased to say we did. That was through bringing in a number of transferees to meet our skills where we needed the skills at this point. Another highlight is the strategic workforce plan is progressing, and we've just completed our business planning cycle. Once that's been reviewed, there will be recommendations which we will bring into the strategic workforce plan to add and enhance what we already have. And we will be reviewing how we've progressed against those areas which we've already highlighted. The updated plan will be presented in REC in April. So there you go. I wasn't going to say in the near future. So that is the plan, to have that in April for you, with how we've progressed about those areas that we've identified, along with the new areas that have come out of the business planning process and how we will work. Obviously, you can see there's a number of areas that we will need to focus on going forward in regards to our RAG status. One being that this in Q2, we haven't met the 90% target in regards to our police staff in our established vacancies. So whilst our police staff numbers continue to increase slightly, some of those are going into our temporary roles within the organisation. So we're working on that to bring those numbers up. There is a slight increase in officer sickness. This is where my business partners and team are working closely with the directorates to understand this is pocket areas. So we can see that there are certain areas within the organisation where this is happening, and we're working with robust processes plus supportive measures to understand what that is to bring those officers back. What we can see though is there is a decrease in staff sickness, so that is a positive way forward. And the final thing I want to highlight is occupational health. Obviously, that's shown as a red, and I'm working currently with occupational health to understand the SLAs and when these were last reviewed, because they've been in place a very long time, and actually do they meet the needs of us as a force, and looking at the whole provision of OH and where we want to be, taking into account our wellbeing strategy. So that's where I will leave it, and I'm happy to take questions.
Dawn.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'm really pleased to see we've met the uplift target. That's brilliant news. Well done. I wondered how much the female representation has decreased. It just says it's decreased here. It doesn't give me a number or a percentage. It'd be good to know that. And the sickness is high in pockets. I was wondering, what were the pockets? Is there some specific we should know about there? And the occupational health one you've answered. So those couple for me. Thank you.
Any other questions in the first instance? Okay, then Kelly, I'm going to add a couple here though. I mean, the first thing is to say, you know, how long some of us have been pushing for workforce planning, and it really has moved on from substantially from where we were. But I guess what I'm interested in now is how we move it into the next stage. And I was thinking specifically about what our policing plan priorities say, and whether the performance that we've got here demonstrates that we're moving in the right direction on being the employer of choice, and you know, some of the other attract, recruit, retain, for example, and I can see the charts and the tables, and Dawn's asked a couple of points of detail, but can you set it into responses into that strategic context? And when we're talking about or thinking about the next phase of the strategic planning, what do you have any idea at this point about how you might adapt or adjust the approach you've taken so far to get closer to delivering on those policing plan priorities?
That one's a very big question, so I'll start with Dawn's first. In regards to females decreasing, I don't know the exact numbers, but I'm happy to share them, and I've got it in regards to percentages and what that looks like. What we find is obviously in September, it wasn't the student officers that we bring in, which is where we normally see our diversity of increased representation. It was through transferees, where representation is not as diverse as we would like. We did bring some female officers into specialist areas, but not as diverse. But I will get those numbers to you. In regards to pockets of sickness, when I talk about that, that's where we have there's no areas of concern. We are managing those. It is where we either have officers that have it's musculoskeletal areas where we need to look at how we bring them back, and there are some where it's a higher increase in sickness that falls within that mental health area, and we are bringing those in. It is particular areas. When I say particular areas, we obviously have local policing and specialist operations that have the highest proportion of police officers. So when we talk about there being pockets, that's what we're talking about as in directorates as a whole, rather than individual small units. And the business partners within HR working with the directorate heads and operational leads to those areas to work with them to support coming back, or if we need to, the more pushing of the people back or coming up with how we support that. So those are their areas, but if you want any more clarity in numbers, happy to provide it, because we provide it on a monthly basis to our directorate heads so they can work with that. In regards to moving to the next stage of the strategic workforce plan, it comes in a number of pockets. Obviously, we focused on the areas where we felt that we needed to work on, which was detectives, which is a national shortage when it comes to that area. We know all of policing is vulnerable in that area, and what can we do to enhance our capability in that? That's a big piece of work that has not just been supported by HR, but a number of departments have worked with us on that. Becoming an employer of choice is massively part of the workforce plan, but is bigger and takes into a number of faceted of points with attract, recruit, retain. It's part of our wellbeing strategy, which is taking the wellbeing blue light framework in regards to how we attract well, we recruit well, we retain well, and people leave well feeling happy. And that's part of our new wellbeing strategy that we are looking at, and so we can have measures against it. Are we doing what we need to do that? Another point is the National Talent Development Strategy, which is being led by Alex as the Chief Officer, and work's going on about how we are looking at our talent, how we're developing that, how we identify that, and how we work along that. So there are a number of pockets, and I'm more than happy to bring all of that together and put it into one aspect in the refreshed strategic workforce plan to show you how we are meeting those, because obviously the first iteration was very much about those 5 key areas of business that we felt we needed to develop, but now we're moving wider on the policing plan.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the update. Really, really helpful. Really great progress. I've got a handful of sort of questions. Workforce of choice, workplace of choice. As a smaller force, why do people come to join the City of London Police? Appreciate it's a wonderful place, and everybody I work with in the police is wonderful. But when you're building your career when you're building your career, typically, larger organisations provide much more opportunity for promotion, for example, and building and progressing your career in a number of different ways. Smaller organisations tend to have those fewer opportunities, especially if there's less attrition in the ranks, and therefore they're in a rigid structure, the opportunity to progress becomes quite diminished. So keen to understand attrition rates, keen to understand why people join and why people leave, and where do they come and go to when they come and go to the City of London Police?
I can talk from personal experience as well as some of the processes we've currently undertaken. So I, a very long time ago, was in the biggest force in the country to now the smallest, unique and loveliest force in the country. And I would say, yes, people could see it as we are small, but actually the breadth and experience that people get being in a small force, you get exposed to a lot more than what you would be in a bigger force, and therefore helps you develop and expand. When we talk about why CULP and the opportunity to progress, if I look at our current promotion processes that we have run this year, Inspector and Sergeant, namely the 2 biggest that we run, the inspectors was external, and we had over 100+ applications for that. A lot of internal, but a lot of external wishing to join us. That could be because who we are surrounded by, people are not feeling very happy. But many wanting to join us because they've heard good things from other transferees who have joined us, because we still have our own corporate services. With the bigger organisations, they don't have their own support services, HR, finance, etc. That's outsourced, so they have that feel. There is an opportunity to progress in doing many different things, opportunities to be part of initiatives, which may not be promotion, but gives you that CPD that you may not get in other forces or be recognised. In regards to leaving, some people do leave on promotion because they weren't successful in our promotion process. That's not to say our promotion process is not correct, it's just people feel that they go to other forces to do that. Some people, it is good to leave and come back. We've had a lot of officers that have left us on promotion and come back either on promotion or lateral transfer, so that says a lot when officers do that. Staff pretty much the same. Our attrition rates are low. Recently I went to the police CIPD forum, and we are unique in the fact that forces are struggling to fill their officer roles. We have quite a nice healthy select list, so I will take that as showing what everybody does and shows what a great force we are. Hopefully that answers your question.
No, absolutely. Thank you very much. What is our attrition rate?
Apologies. Let me just. My computer's logged out and the face doesn't work, but it's low.
So I was just going to say, if you were going to be looking for a number, then I was going to bring in.
That's what I was going to do, actually.
Yeah.
That's all right.
Yeah.
So just to buy a bit of time on that, because it's probably in the pack somewhere, I'd imagine. So yeah, and just in terms of absolutely support everything Kelly said in terms of the attraction, and I suppose from a police officer perspective, and a lesser extent a police staff perspective, in terms of movement, we do lose a lot of people to the Met, and we take people from the Met. So as our natural neighbour in policing, you can see a transition, and that's not a bad thing. We gain, we lose. but people get experience, they come back. So that has a big impact. The other impact realistically is travel and transport hubs. So Essex are we're an importer from Essex Police. We do that carefully, and we have a good collaboration with their chief officer team around not stripping from particular skills. But that train line is good. So we have a lot of people who work for us who live in that area of the country, and part of that for police officers specifically is the kind of travel package and the attraction. But they're the kind of logistical things, but actually I think Kelly's right. Having worked in a number of forces, there are pros and cons in being a small force, but one of the pros is that you can get, you know, the experience, you can get to work in different departments, you can know people, and I like to also think, as Kelly alluded to, it's the culture of the force that we have here, and we carefully look after, that makes people want to come, and we saw a lot of that through the National Black Police Association conference, which we held a few weeks ago, and people wanting to come as a result of us showcasing not just the City of London Police, but the City of London Corporation and the City of London itself.
Thank you, that's really helpful. It's amazing how many officers travel from so far to come in. I was absolutely blown away at the Special Constables dinner at Mansion House, how far people like Jackie travel in to come into the City of London Police, and with so much passion as well. It's really, really great to hear. Just one last question, if I may. Do we have a rigid organisational design, i.e. we have a certain number of roles at detective, constable, etc., or is it really around capability and capacity?
I'll answer that one first, and I'll go back to attrition. So we do have an organisational TOM. The questions are when adverts are advertised in regards to a detective versus constable. It's not to say a detective can't apply for a uniform constable role, but if the questions are, does it need to be a detective, and do they need to hold the qualifications to do that role? Is that what you need? So that's where we try and ensure, because detectives are a national shortage, do you have to be a detective to do that role? And we try to understand if a detective wishes to leave detective based role for a uniform, and what is the pull from that? Is there a reason? Is it for development? Is it they've fallen out of love with detective? What is that? And we try and work with them to understand what that is due to the national shortage on that. In regards to attrition, so our attrition rates for officers is 2% in July and September, and was 1% in Q1. Overall, so it's gone up slightly, but that is low in comparison to other forces. What I will say is a lot of those are down to resignations. Where you'll find resignations is generally in the first few years of service, where officers come in and it's very different now to what it was many years ago, where it's a job for life. Many officers will come in and they'll use it as experience, and they'll go off and do other things. But our attrition rates are so, and it has just been that I've just been advised that our female representation has dropped by 1% in this quarter. So hopefully that answers all your questions.
If I could jump in one more time, I apologise. So typically in the commercial space, you know, we look for attrition rates of between 5 and 10% per annum to create some movement within the organisation, create opportunity and give people the chance to grow in different ways. So I'm not well placed to understand if 2% is positive. It sounds positive in some respects, but is that healthy for an organisation within the public sector to only have a 2% attrition rate? Thank you.
What I will say is we do have a lot of movement within the force. So whilst 2% may sound low, we have a lot of temporary opportunities that have been developed during reported fraud and other roles, where we're finding those staff that have come in to undertake established roles have moved for development opportunities in that respect. Currently in the 6 months, I've just been advised that our attrition rate is 4%, but I would say that's a positive, bearing in mind when we look at where we're competing in the city with private sector organisations and what we offer. It shows actually we're a good place to come, and it's not all about financial reward.
Paul, did you want to come in, Paul?
Kelly's ably covered it. I was just going to add separately, just on the cryptocurrency job, you mentioned that we weren't involved. The teams are aware of the job, but we weren't involved in the city.
Can I just ask one follow-up question? I was interested in you saying that you have an agreement with Chief Officer Team and Essex. I think you said that you won't you'll try not to be stripping out, you know, particular areas and or levels or types of staff from that area. I can understand that, and I can understand another force wanting to have that broad agreement. But if somebody applies, how does it fit with open, transparent recruitment processes if 10 people from Essex are the best fit for 10 jobs here?
Yeah, no, it's a fair question, and I don't want to overplay this agreement. I think what we have is an open dialogue with Essex chief officers for a number of reasons, including potentially, you know, collaborations around accommodation and things as a close neighbour. But it's not a formal agreement. But what it is, and we would do this with all forces, and we would like to think that was reciprocated as well. It is an understanding that all at once we wouldn't strip out particular skill sets. So one of the most obvious is firearms officers, and that is where it's happened. And we've had discussions. Now, that's not to say if we had 10 people apply, they were the best 10 people, they would get the jobs and they would come. But what we might discuss is how and when we bring them across, because to take 10 officers all at once might not be the best thing for policing in Essex, policing UK. So it's completely fair and transparent, but I think it would be remiss of chief officer teams not to be communicating and making sure that we're not robbing Peter to pay Paul, so to speak.
I do understand that, and I think I've seen in the papers that we've been quite successful in recruiting into our fire officer vacant posts. So I don't want to ask if that's all come from Essex, but I can see that, you know.
Yes, and it hasn't at all. That's just an example that I've used, and equally we lose firearms officers as an example to the Met, you know,
sure,
every month as well.
Yeah.
So there is a realistic churn amongst policing. But, and this goes back to the police uplift programme, what that doesn't do for policing UK is increase police officer numbers. So
Sure.
That's why we do a careful balance between transferees, but also new recruits and developing new people.
Yeah.
And we've definitely shifted that in the last few years, from being more transferee reliant. And of course, that has a cost implication as well, which is carefully considered.
Yeah. Thanks very much. Liz.
Mine is, now that you've brought up firearms, which is where I was going to go, if we are having agreements with Essex about not poaching, maybe we could have a agreement with Essex about training facilities.
Happy to talk about that in the closed session, if that's okay.
It'll come up in some of the estate's papers later. Yeah, thank you. Okay, let's move on then, please, Town Clerk.
At item 6, we have the City of London Police Productivity Action Plan for Q2. This is for information on pages 83 to 90.
I think, Alex, you're going to introduce this, but before you do, I read this paper, and I'm hoping that in your presentation of it, you're going to be able to say something that's much more specific about some of the progress here, because we've got lots of words, but we haven't got anything that really grips me or tells me that we're really in a place where we're measuring. And productivity has got to be a core part of our business now and into future years, particularly when we're looking at estates and finances. So I wanted to try and help, and I'm sorry I couldn't talk to you in advance, but to try and contextualize some of the discussion into some of the other strategic issues that or underlying issues that we have to deal with. And I think it's a kind of a bit of a early warning, if you like, that when we get Q3, there is no doubt that I and I think other members would want to see a report that was looking much more specific about improvements that we've made.
Yeah, absolutely. Fair comment. There's work that we're still doing around evaluation and measurement. So there are a couple of pieces of work that have been taken forward over the last quarter. 2 of those relate to where we're working with partners and we are transferring the demand onto the appropriate partner for managing that, which is one way of improving our productivity. And we need to, and we're doing some work to measure the actual time savings that provides. And then there is a technology that we have implemented, which has saved time around an administrative manual process for pulling together suspect information. Again, there were some projections put forward as part of the business case around the time savings on that, and we're doing the work around that benefits realisation as well. So we'll be able to report back on that and how we've reinvested those time savings into higher value activities around research, and we would expect that to translate into things like increased identification of suspects. And so there's more work that we need to do just to set those out, but that is part of the work that we are doing.
Thank you. Can I just have first go at questions as well then, Alex, please? Because I don't know the culture of the force in the same way as I might know about the culture in other organisations. But if you talk to very different groups in City of London Police, you know, both staff and uniformed officers, and you're trying to talk about productivity, do you get a general sense of people really understand it and get it, or is it, well, you know, I don't know what that's about, that's just some management speak that somebody else needs to deal with? So how bedded in is this across all areas?
So there's definitely work to do in terms of culture. I think different people have different understandings of productivity. So we try and define that as, you know, achieving the same outcomes as less, or better outcomes, really, with the same input. So some of it is a performance outcome, and some of it is a time or resource saving outcome. We've done a little bit of workshopping with the frontline around the things that they think we could improve, so the things that make a difference to their day jobs. So it could be around improving digitisation of forms, you know, really basic things around using Microsoft Forms as opposed to manual forms. So we've done some of that type of stuff, which I think helps to drive that sort of understanding and culture around productivity. As part of the business planning process, one of the things that we asked each of the department heads to do was to identify what productivity improvements they could make to manage the rising demand that they might be seeing. So we are at the start of the journey in terms of the culture, and some of that goes to the points around being better at the evaluations as well. But yes, we are maturing our approach.
And I think what helps, Alex is absolutely right in terms of the culture. And I think if you ask 10 different people, you might get 10 different answers depending on where you asked. I think the best thing we can do in terms of that culture is highlighting good examples of where this is happening, because that's what our people will understand and see the benefits of. So, you know, just Alex has covered the technical elements, but also, as we spoke about in local policing committee on Monday, the right care, right person, which is also in this paper, where we're ensuring that vulnerable members of the public getting the right service from the right agency, but that has a knock-on effect in terms of saving a number of police hours as well. So really important for us with that work to understand those hours of savings and understand what we're going to do with them as well. And I think our people will understand those examples and see the benefits, and that's how I think we sell the productivity. But as Alex said, culturally, I think some work to do still.
Dush.
Thank you. Productivity is also one of those weird and wonderful things that we talk about, but nobody ever really knows how to achieve. Productivity is, you know, predominantly, at least in the commercial space, it's a management piece, right? So it's something that you have in your objectives as a leader of people, of areas, and it's something that then is measured periodically, quarterly, semi-annually, you know, annual review, etc., etc. So, you know, how do we deliver measurement and accountability of productivity within the City of London Police? Thank you.
So we have a productivity delivery group that includes the directorate heads across the organisation, where we look at progress against the plan. So that's how we do it at that level, and then we report up into Strategic Performance Board on a quarterly basis as well. So that's for the specific productivity actions that we have, and then we're also looking at it through the lens of any sort of cacheable efficiencies. And I think the focus around sort of future productivity priorities will need to be very much focused around those that are most likely to provide cacheable efficiencies as well.
So what I'm hearing is that's not in individuals' objectives as part of their performance lifecycle management, because productivity and performance go hand in hand. And I would expect, you know, leaders to have that as an objective within their performance management, something that they are assessed by their leaders and managers, you know, on a periodic basis. And that's how you deliver those outcomes. That's how you measure those outcomes, because they become much more central to a person's career and projection and variable comp.
Yep. Yes, that's true. And each of the directorates has a business plan that comes out of the business planning process. So the productivity areas that were identified as part of that will form part of that directorate level business plan, and they should flow down into their senior leader objectives as well. Agree with that.
Okay, and other questions, Jackie?
I just had one going back to the chair's point around evaluation and measurement, which I think are really key for this. And also I think it helps the workforce understand what we mean by productivity, as well as the examples and best practice. I suppose I have raised it before, it's just about capacity and resource. So who will be designing that evaluation and measurement framework for this piece of work, and is there enough resource to be doing that? And then also, can this evaluation measurement identify risks against allocation of resource and capacity to build this? Thank you.
Yeah, so we don't have dedicated resource. We've got our strategy planning team who have some analytical capability, and we're also working closely with the individual action owners to design some of that evaluation and baseline some of that. Sue, our Director of Change, has also been working on a benefits realisation framework, specifically around projects, but is relevant to other types of intervention. So there's toolkits and those types of things being developed as well.
Okay, thank you. If I could just ask one final question on sorry, and I was looking at, I suppose what we've talked about here is you know, quantity and quality. I'm not sure that there's much in the report that is really about quality. And so there's maybe it's, you know, it's part of that evolution of evolutionary approach to getting productivity understood and bedded in. But I think in some of the next iterations, quality has got to take a parallel place and then rise up in the work that we're doing here, because if it's not qualitative, it doesn't matter how many you do if there's no positive impact at the end of it.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay. Dawn.
Just one very quick question. Thank you, Chair. The rest of policing must monitor this and must, I'm presuming the rest of police forces do this. You could say I'm wrong. Can we not draw from that and take some of their examples and best in class rather than reinvent the wheel?
Yes. So there's lots of different bodies on the police productivity space. So there's a Home Office group as well who are doing some work, and the College of Policing are as well, and they are also developing some evaluation tools around that, and we volunteered to trial and be part of that. And then there are other forces that are also implementing productivity initiatives. A lot of it is based around tech as well. And one of the things that Sue is doing is working through our how we're using robotics and AI and what our future roadmap is for that, which we're going to bring back here in February in terms of our plans around that. And so part of that has been looking at what innovations are going on in other forces and putting it against the city environment in terms of where would that have the most impact, wherever we got the demand pressures.
Thank you. I just want to throw in two other things, sorry, and not expecting you to answer this, Alex, but I think that as this conversation's been emerging, you talked about digitising. I don't think I've heard you say anything about AI and how that can contribute to productivity. And I don't think I've heard you say anything about cash releasing either, but productivity has got to move also into something that's cash releasing so we can invest in other things, and something that's becoming a much more self-sustaining. So again, not to go through today, but in future reports, I think some focus on that would be extremely helpful. Okay. Any other comments from any members? No, if not, then Paul, did you want to come in?
So just, yeah, I agree with the comments, Chair. I'm not debating against those. We have had a lot of discussions around AI, and there are opportunities around automation, robotics, right up to other AI. So, some of the challenge for us will be our size. So sometimes the demand and the benefits of deploying AI and robotics for what is small teams and small demand, the cost of those systems actually won't stack up. So that's some of the stuff just internally we've been wrestling with, but with big demand, there's definitely opportunities in there where we can.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, next item, Town Clerk.
At item 7, we have questions on matters relating to the work of the committee.
The only question that I'm aware of is the one that came in from Deborah Oliver. I know, Richard, you've responded to Deborah. Do you just want to, so we can note it here and then it'll go to the right?
So the question from Deborah was about the new London Museum and the potential implications for policing. We've, myself and the Deputy Commissioner have had an exchange on that. He has replied already with response. I'm happy to circulate that. I don't think it's an REC question though.
No, I don't think it is, but given that it was put to REC, I just wanted it to be noted and that it had gone to the right place to Paul. Yeah, thank you very much. And we're not aware of any other questions.
At item 8, we have any other business that the chairman considers urgent.
No, not aware of any.
At item 9, we have exclusion of the public. Do members agree to exclude the public?
I can do.
Please allow me a moment to stop the live stream.